And yes, good morning to you once again. It's Friday, the 13th of June, 2025. The program is On the Lord's Side, Christian Perspectives on News and Current Events. My name is Olufemi Oguntoku. You can follow me on x.com at olufemiog. You can follow Gospel Bells Radio on x.com at Gospel Bells Radio. Yesterday in Nigeria, we celebrated Democracy Day. And yesterday's episode of On the Lord's Side was devoted to a large extent to exploring the history of June 12 in Nigeria, and we engaged with the lessons that we as people on the Lord's side ought to draw from the benefit of the history we have and the benefit of the current realities that we are experiencing. And we also mentioned yesterday that the President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, cancelled the traditional early morning presidential address on Democracy Day and instead chose to address a joint session of the National Assembly. He did address that joint session and made a number of pronouncements, as you would expect from such a momentous occasion. I'm not going to go into the details of the things he said, neither am I going to address some of the concerns that many people have about the culture of sycophancy that now seems to engulf Nigeria. Neither am I going to express opinion about the singing of the president's praise in the hallowed chambers, or what ought to be the hallowed chambers of the National Assembly. But I'm going to express the light that yesterday President Tinubu honored Mr. Ken Saro-Wiwa, the late Ken Saro-Wiwa, and other Ogoni leaders who were executed by General Sani Abacha. Interestingly, this week we've had more than enough opportunity to address the matters of General Sani Abacha. Remember that early this week we engaged with the statement by the widow of the late dictator Sani Abacha, who, instead of admitting that the husband stole, which has been proven beyond all doubts, she said that her husband kept the money for Nigeria. We already addressed that, and then we addressed June 12, and of course you cannot relate the story of June 12 without mentioning Sani Abacha, the man who perpetuated the annulment of that June 12, who got into office in the mistaken belief by some that he would reverse the annulment. He perpetuated the annulment. More than that, he arrested the winner of that election, and that person eventually died in the custody of the government. And again, you cannot discuss the history of Abacha's rulership over Nigeria without mentioning Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was executed by Abacha. And yesterday, the President Bola Tinubu, conferred national honors on Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni leaders who were executed in 1995 by the Sani Abacha-led military administration over their struggle for environmental justice for their oil-rich community in Nigeria's Niger Delta region. There is something about Ken Saro-Wiwa that I resonate with a lot, and sometimes whenever his matter comes up, or the anniversary of his execution, I always tend to have an overpowering impulse to honor his memory. I do not know why, but I recall that at least since we started this program, I must have devoted episodes to Mr. Ken Saro-Wiwa for more than maybe about 4 or 5 times. And yesterday I shared extensively on Twitter key facts about the Ogoni 9 that everybody ought to know. And interestingly, that tweet got about 11,000 views with 56 reposts, 98 likes, and about 35 people who saved that post on Twitter yesterday. 10 key facts about Nigeria's Ogoni 9 you should know. Who were they? Ken Saro-Wiwa, Saturday Doby, and the others. They were activists from Ogoni land fighting for environmental and social justice. You know, Ogoni land is one of those geographical areas where Nigeria derives oil. Oil has been the mainstay of the Nigerian economy for a long time, and Ogoni land was the place where Shell, that international oil exploration company, was operating at that time. And there were concerns about environmental degradation over a long period of time. Kensarua was in the forefront of that. What was their cause? They led the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, popularly called MOSOP, demanding accountability from oil companies like Shell for devastating Ogoni land's environment through oil spills. They adopted a non-violent approach to their protests, to their activism, and that is documented. Their protests were peaceful. They used global campaigns and local rallies to highlight the pollution that ruined farmland, rivers, and livelihoods in the Niger Delta. And the louder their voices got, the more it became impossible for Shell, to operate in the Niger Delta, because the place was becoming restive. The people led by Kensarua and others were becoming more conscious of the degradation of the environment. But in 1994, 9 of them were falsely accused of killing 4 Ogoni chiefs during a riot. Evidence suggests that the military regime orchestrated the charges to silence them. And then there was a sham trial. Under General Sani Abacha's dictatorship, they faced a biased military tribunal with no fair defense. Witnesses later admitted to being bribed to testify against them. In 1995, despite global appeals from figures like Nelson Mandela and Bill Clinton, 9 Ogoni persons, including Kensarua, they were hanged on November 10, 1995. That day will forever remain a blot on our collective conscience as a nation. And of course, it sparked worldwide condemnation. Their deaths led to Nigeria's suspension from the Commonwealth. It intensified the scrutiny of Shell, and the role of Shell in the Niger Delta. And of course, in 2025, yesterday, specifically June 12, 2025, President Tinubu pardoned the Ogoni 9, acknowledging the injustice and honoring their fight for Ogoni land's future. I mean, this is an interesting turn in history, an historic turn in history, and we had occasion to reflect on this yesterday as well, when we look at the history of June 12 in Nigeria and how things have turned around, so much so that those then who were in the opposition, who were persecuted by government, then are now in power. Indeed, a man who was jailed, who was to be killed in jail, later on became the president. That's Olusegun Obasanjo, a man who ran away from Nigeria on self-exile. That's Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is now the president of Nigeria, and a man who before June 12 would have been thought to be invincible. That's Basharun MK Abiola. Of course, he was denied the presidency despite winning it, and he died in prison. Of course, there were consequences and riots and death, but hey, he died. And you cannot but look back at history and wonder at how God works everything out without excusing wrongdoers. I mentioned that point over and over again yesterday. I'm delighted that it occurred to the president, and he had the political courage to do this. One of the questions that many people have raised, or that many people raised yesterday in discussing this matter, is the question of why presidents before now did not do this. Because it would appear as something that ought to have been done, and you begin to wonder to yourself, why didn't anybody do this? Somebody wrote in reply to my said, "Thank you, Mr. President, for the posthumous state pardon you granted the Ogoni 9. The national awards, the national honors you awarded them were most deserving. For someone who have had a keen interest in Ogoni and MOSOP since 1993, I have prayed and waited for a day like this." And I'm glad that somebody wrote this. This is something that resonates with me as well. I always ask myself why, and it's possible because perhaps it occurred at a time when it was like a coming of age for many of us. We were just either in university or just getting out of university or something around that time, and we're just becoming conscious of the country and of the state of our country. And I recall in the house of my friend watching a documentary, a foreign sponsored documentary on the on the plight of the Ogoni people, the degradation of the Ogoni land, and of course on Ken Saro-Wiwa himself. So this person wrote Tunde Olayode saying, for someone who has a keen interest in the Ogoni, not Ogoni, and most of matter since '93, prayed and waited for a day like many of us indeed have prayed and waited for a day like this. In fact, anyone of good conscience must have waited for such a day as what happened yesterday. It is the next best thing that could have happened. The best thing would have been for Abacha not to have killed them, right? But the next best thing was what happened yesterday, recognizing the injustice and taking steps to correct it. That is a core Christian duty. To recognize that injustice has been done, to apologize for injustice done in the past, and to take steps to remedy it. Reasonable steps, not unreasonable steps, that some people propose to address historical injustice. And as we discussed this yesterday online, a lady brought up a most important point, and this lady said, look, it is so unfair that everybody talks about the Ogoni 9, that is Ken Saro-Wiwa and the 8 others who were executed. What about the Ogoni 4? And who were the Ogoni 4? And you see, when this lady brought up that matter, in fact, she put a broken heart emoji there. Once she brought it up, I began to think about how it is just so humanly difficult to bring about true justice, really, in any matter. Because if you understand what really happened, you will also find that this can be a difficult matter indeed. Many people have said in the past, they have asked the question saying that, well, why didn't presidents before Bola Ahmed Tinubu, why did he not do this? Why did he not pardon these people? Especially people have mentioned President Goodluck Jonathan, who himself is from the Niger Delta. One would have expected him to recognize that injustice or taking steps to do this. Maybe it did not occur to them. Maybe they were not politically courageous enough. But one of the considerations would have been the matter of the Ogoni 4. Who were the Ogoni 4? These were people that the Ogoni 9 were accused of killing. So you begin to understand the matter properly now. The Ogoni 4 were the ones that the Ogoni 9 were accused of killing. But many people believe, and rightly so, that the Ogoni 4 were just pawns. They were pawns in Abacha's brutal game. Who were they? They were accused of being pro-government vultures by some Mossop factions. So, Ken Saro-Wiwa and others leading Mossop, that's the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people. And naturally, when you have movement like that, you have some people who don't support you or who don't agree with your point of view. And there were these 4 people who were accused of being pro-government, and not supporting Mossop. And then the Ogoni 4's death, their death occurred amid rising tensions in the Ogoni land. The Mossop was protesting environmental destruction by Shell, and then there was a riot, and then some people killed this Ogoni 4. This Ogoni 4, that is these 4 men from Ogoni land, Edward Kobani, Albert Bade, Samuel Oraj, and Theophilus Oraj. They were killed brutally. And the lady who responded to my text was saying, well, what about the Ogoni 4? What about the Ogoni 4? You are all celebrating the Ogoni 9, but some 4 people were killed. Are we going to forget them? We should not forget them. We do not know the circumstance of that. We do not know for a fact whether they were actually betraying the Mossop cause. Even if they were betraying the Mossop cause, it cannot be justified from a Christian perspective and from a legal perspective as well for them to have been murdered in cold blood. And the narrative is that many people believe that the Ogoni 4 were used as pawns by Abacha's regime to fracture Mossop and justify a crackdown. The 4 of them were labeled as government collaborators, possibly to sow discord within the Ogoni movement, and their murders provided a pretext for repression. So I believe you now get the picture. The picture is that what is generally believed is that the Abacha military dictatorship, wanting to crack down Mossop and Ken Saro-Wiwa and the others, wanting to put a stop to the agitation by the Niger Deltas in Ogoni land, then tried to fracture Mossop, got these 4 people to appear to be pro-government, or got some people to accuse them of being pro-government, instigated a riot, or started a riot, or used the cloak, the pretext of a riot, to kill these 4 people, and upon them being killed, to then arrest Ken Saro-Wiwa and others and say, look, you were the ones who killed these people. And it's a lesson for us. We have to pause there and learn a lesson. You don't want ever to be used as pawn. Sometimes you don't even know that you are being used as a pawn, and that appears to be the most not only humbling but terrifying thing. I would say most terrifying, the possibility that you could be doing something in good faith, most passionately, but actually being used as a pawn by some other persons. And that other person who is actually using you as a pawn will regard you as what we call a useful idiot. This person, they look at the person, this person doesn't know that we are using him. But that person goes on, so passionate about a cause, without having the benefit of the full picture, not knowing the entire story, but going all out so passionately about it, and and celebrating it. And may we not be that pawn. That is why for us as Christians, dwelling in the Holy Spirit, discretion, asking for His leadership, doing only the things He actually wants us to do, doing only the things that glorify Him. Those are some of the ways that we can avoid being a useful idiot in the hand of those who want to use us. But when people are talking about the trial being a sham trial, why was it a sham trial? I'll give you some of the reasons why it was indeed a sham trial, and I did post a tweet yesterday as well, talking about why it was a sham trial. In the first place, the tribunal, listen to this, was chaired by Ibrahim Auta. He was a judge. Then it included one Colonel Hamid Ali, an active military officer with no judicial experience. Now, many people have pointed out, now you are bringing charges against the Ogoni people, the military government. You did not take them to a regular court. You set up a special tribunal. How do you give a special tribunal the power to issue a death sentence? Death sentences are not things that in any decent judicial system are just to be issued by any tribunal like that. And then you just put the tribunal together. The government, being the accuser, just put the tribunal together. You included in that tribunal Colonel Hamid Ali, who, as a military officer, must take orders from Abacha, right? He must take orders from Abacha. If Abacha had said to Hamid Ali, vote for execution, Hamid Ali had no choice in the matter. He was a military officer. He must take orders from his superior. And then there was a Professor Etim Etetu, who did not have legal expertise as well. Their defense lawyers faced severe intimidation, including threat to their safety. They were not allowed. They were denied access to their clients. The charges were fabricated because evidence did not support it. There were procedural irregularities that people pointed out over and over again. And you want to know this, there was a cruel execution process. It has now been pointed out later on, after the death of Abacha, that the executions were conducted in a manner described as deliberately prolonged, with reports suggesting that they were filmed. The execution was filmed for the sadistic satisfaction of military leaders. This inhumane treatment underscored the punitive and extrajudicial nature of the process. And as I reflected on this yesterday, I asked myself, let's not immediately excuse those who were in that tribunal. We're all talking about Abacha did it, yes, but he did not do it alone. Did he do it alone? He did not do it alone. And this is something that we should always bear in mind, right? That he did not do it alone. There were collaborators. There were means. There were instruments he used. There were those who carried out those unlawful orders. And the first person, Justice Ibrahim Auta, and this is a very important point for us to make about Nigeria. You want to ask yourself, those who sat on that tribunal, who presided over that sham trial, who issued that death sentence, what became of them? What became of them? Did they then become persona non grata in Nigeria? Did they then become people to be pitied? Did punishment fall on them, immediately from heaven? Well, I'll tell you, that was Justice Ibrahim Auta. What became of him? He later became the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court. He later became the Judge of the Federal High Court. Make of that what you will. There was one Colonel Hamid Ali who sat on that tribunal. What happened to him? He later became the customs boss in Nigeria. Remember, he was customs boss, comptroller of the customs under President Muhammadu Buhari, and that was Professor Etim Ete as well. I do not know what became of him. I know he was with the University of Calabar, but They do not know what became of him. Make of that what you will. Those who do condemnable things in Nigeria don't become persona non grata. Make of that what you will. And for us who are on the Lord's side, that is indicative of a wider theology that teaches that the consummation of all things will not happen in this world. When you talk about justice, the act of justice, don't always expect that ultimate justice will happen in this world. In God's way of doing things, in his own calendar, the consummation of all things will come at the end of the age. That is the eschatological approach of the Christian. At the end of the age, that is when he will bring the consummation of all things. So don't be like David, who went around and looked around and saw the evil people prospering and said to himself, hey, if wicked people are prospering like this, maybe I should be a wicked person as well. Maybe there's no point in being righteous. Don't be like him, and don't let your foot slip on account of that. I think it is worth mentioning that those who sat on that tribunal, they went on to become elevated persons in Nigeria. They were actually elevated, not demoted. They did not become persona non grata in Nigeria. And again, I say it, make of that what you will, but it gives us even a better understanding of our situation. I mean, it must be said about Ken Saro-Wiwa, to his credit, that to the very end he was bold. I want to play a very short clip of something he said on the day of the judgment, where he was unbowed and he continued to agitate for the for environmental justice in the Niger Delta.
Before sentence was passed, in his last public statement, Ken Saro-Wiwa made a final appeal for the people of the Niger Delta.
There is no possibility whatsoever that I or Mossad could ever have planned any such action. And I will forever avow it, no matter what any forum decides upon. I appeal to you, my Lord, for only one thing. The Ogoni people have suffered tremendously in this country. They have made tremendous contributions to this country. The Niger Delta itself is in serious trouble. We need every assistance that we can get.
On the 31st of October, Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 others were found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. 6 of the total 15 defendants were acquitted, including Ledum Mite.
Amazing. So that video was posted by a channel called History Lovers 001. I mean, what can we take away from this as people on the Lord's side? That God brings about justice. He's a God of justice. That justice is not always witnessed in this world, but sometimes he brings it in this world as well. Would we call what happened yesterday justice for Ken Saro-Wiwa? In a sense, yes. Some people would look back, some people would debate it and say, well, it was justice, but hey, he died. If God wanted, he ought to have stepped in. He could have stepped in and he could have stopped Abacha from actually executing him. And that is proof again that in this fallen world, it does not work that way. Why did God allow Abacha to kill Ken Saro-Wiwa? We will never know. But now we are looking back and we are seeing that those who thought themselves victors, who thought themselves rulers, who thought themselves on top of the world, who thought themselves in power, and who obviously assumed that they will always be in power, they are now people who are now ridiculed in history. And somebody may say, well, I'm going to do what is right so that human history will eventually celebrate me. I mean, and that's a wise thing to do. You want to do what is right, even if the contemporary culture does not appreciate you, even if the contemporary condemns you. You want to make sure you are doing what is right for the future. Because in the future, by the turn of history, as Martin Luther Jr. said, the arc of justice will always, never be moved inside of the good. And you'll be recognized, you'll be celebrated. But sometimes even this fallen world will not recognize or celebrate you. In that case, do not waver, because what is sure is that there is a God of justice who at the end of time will hear the cries of those who have been unjustly dealt with in this word. I do not ever want to end any engagement celebrating a person who has done valiantly in any secular cause without mentioning that the most tragic thing would be for a person who has passionately fought for any good cause in this world not to know the Lord Jesus Christ. We cannot but mention that. If we know anybody who has passionately fought for a good cause in this fallen world, always fighting, we should be praying for that person. And if you can reach out to that person to also know the Lord, because it will be heartbreaking for a person to have courageously fought the evil forces of this world, to have courageously fought against bad governance, to have courageously fought against injustice in this world without that person himself or herself knowing the Lord Jesus Christ. How heartbreaking that would be. And that's my prayer for all those who are in the forefront of fighting injustice in this world, true injustice, that they will also know the Lord, because then, what a celebration it will be. Even if they suffer all imaginable degradation or even death in this world, they'll be celebrated in heaven. I do hope that always you will be on the side of those who are fighting for what is right, and I do hope above all else that your definition of what is right will be as defined by the Bible. Thank you very much for staying with us this morning for On the Lord's Side, Christian Perspectives on News and Current Events. I hope to be with you again on Monday by the grace of God. Whatever you do this weekend, please remain firmly on the Lord's side. God bless you. God bless you really good.
Listening to GospelBellsRadio.com, the Christian internet radio with a mission to engage the culture with the mind of Christ. Keep listening and invite others too. God bless you.
Engaging the culture with the mind of Christ.
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 Engaging the culture with the mind of Christ.